Welcome again, a new demo from Early Childhood Education Training and Workshops. A happy day to all of you. Our warm greetings to you from ECEF to you. Our guest today from the UK, she is an early childhood consultant, practitioner, researcher, and author. She has worked with children from many years, developing an interest in their behaviors and the impact the actions of well-meaning adults can have on them. As well as she is a highly acclaimed author, researcher, and consultant. She delivers seminars and many workshops. Also, she has delivered keynote speeches through her consultancy and conferences all over the world. Besides, she is working with families, settings, and schools, helping them to identify, celebrate the impact of effective childhood experiences and using these as preparation for all of life's learning, developing, and personal growth. Based on the overall purpose of ECF's workshop is to help researchers, teachers to make appropriate instructional decisions about how to best teach children the principles and philosophy of learning young children as a part of continuum that being at first extended through kindergarten. We are going now with Dr. Kathryn from the UK to learn more about her experiences in learning early childhood through her topic entitled Nurturing Your Learning Child. Now the floor is yours, Dr. Kathryn.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Right, hi and welcome to everybody, and thank you for joining me today. I'm just going to share my screen with you, and then I will give you my talk.
Yes, now you can share it. Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay.
Welcome.
Okay, so hopefully you've got my screen there now. So hi again, and welcome to my fourth talk as part of the Early Childhood Education Foundation. Today, I am going to share a talk with you from a suite of talks that I have that look at nurturing the learning child. And today, I will look at supporting children as they approach that start to school. So in my previous sessions, I have shared talks with you from a suite of online materials that I have available. So I started with nurturing childhoods in the early years, where I spoke to you about the positive practices you can begin right from the start to give children the best opportunities for success. Then in my second talk, we visited a section from the secure child as we looked at understanding children's emotions, how and why they're developing, the purpose they serve, and how you can best support them. Then in my third talk last week, I shared a talk from the happy child as we looked at developing children's social skills, something that's so important to be aware of, given that many of the experiences that children naturally receive to engage with others and interact socially have in recent years been denied from them as the whole world effectively became locked down. Today then, I'd like to share a talk with you from the learning child as we look to support children starting school, whether this is for the first time or after a period of prolonged absence. And when a child's about to start this big transition in their lives, thoughts can turn to the things that they know, to how much they can do and the skills and abilities that they have yet to master. But what I'd like to share with you today is the idea that there are far more important, deep-rooted features of lifelong learning that you can offer children. So in this session, I'd like to talk about how nurturing a child's love of learning is so much more important than how much learning you can squeeze into these early years. And as we look at supporting lifelong learning in the years before school. So like I said then, when we start thinking about preparing a child for school, our thoughts can turn to academic preparation. And in many countries, my own included, the assessments and tests that children have to complete at this time is going to add to that focus on writing letters, recognizing numbers, and the tasks that a child either can or can't perform. And to prepare for this, what we've ended up with is very young children spending big portions of their day doing things that they're not developmentally ready for. But far more worrying than that is all the things that are so important to this early period of development that our children are simply missing out on. So while numbers and letters are great if and when a child's been interested in doing those kind of things, it certainly shouldn't be the focus of what their precious early years is all about. As I look at in one of my other talks, the process of preparing a child for school, and indeed a lifetime of learning, begins even before a child is born. It is embedded within every experience that is offered to them since the time of their birth, and it continues as that child progresses through these lead-up years. And it is so important that you embrace the unique features, freedoms, and possibilities that the early years bring, because the constraints of a school classroom is going to be upon them soon enough. I would then suggest that rather than bringing the limiting practices of that kind of formal sitting down at a desk academic learning into very young children's lives, you should avoid rushing into them for as long as you possibly can, and embrace the styles of learning that young children really need. Get them outside and play. So here's a suggestion then that we read all the time. Children beginning formal schooling on strong foundations progress with favourable trajectories, resulting in repercussions that are felt for years to come. So what does that mean? Well, basically, when children start strong, they stay strong, outperforming their classmates in ways that intensify year on year. But what do we mean by that? And what are strong foundations? And how do you think they can help a child manage on that first day in the classroom? And how can that possibly have an effect when they're a teenager or looking to apply for their first job? Well, to do well in the very first experiences of being inside that school classroom, children need to feel confident. They need to have a good level of communication, both so that they can listen to what's being said, that they can understand what's being asked of them, and they can ask a question if and when they need to. And for those things, there is no magic product that you can buy or program of worksheets to follow in the months before school that will ever adequately prepare a child for all that they're about to face, regardless of what the people who make those products might be trying to tell you. Indeed, considering school readiness in the months prior to starting school is in many ways literally years too late. As you offer children every opportunity you possibly can to develop deep-rooted features of lifelong learning, we also need to remember that we're not just preparing them for that first day of school, which is simply just some date on the calendar that will come and go. You're also developing their attitudes towards learning and their ideas of who they are as a learner, something that will be building and developing continuously throughout their lives. And this shapes the way that they look at all future opportunities and the person that they're becoming. So if a child believes that learning is something that they enjoy, something that they're good at, and something that is right for them, they're going to grasp at those future opportunities. Whereas if from a really early age, they're being given those lessons that maybe learning is tough, it's repetitive or boring, or something they simply can't grasp or is not right for them, they're just going to automatically turn away from it. And this is so tragic because every child that's born into this world is eager to learn. Sorry, can I just ask you to turn your mics off for me, please?
Hey, Dr. Kathryn, please unmute yourself.
Okay, so like I was saying, children when they're first born are wired up to not only be great at learning, but to want to do it. If they weren't, how on earth would they learn as much as they do in those first years of life? Learning a new language, learning how to manage their bodies, learning how to walk, so many things that these children are learning and developing, and they wouldn't get through so much of it unless they were hardwired to do all these kind of things. So what is happening between those stages of learning and that child who's sat in the school classroom thinking that school's not right for them, that it's boring, that they don't want to be there? So at this really early stage, when you've got all of those energies and all of that enthusiasm right there at your fingertips, have fun with learning as you engage, discover, and marvel together. And leave the group sessions and the flashcards and worksheets alone. You really don't need them. So let's begin then by looking at how a child's requirements of learning are changing and how this calls for different approaches and greater sensitivity within certain areas as you avoid inadvertently disadvantaging your children as you progress through these stages. The truth is that the strength of a child's abilities are embedded long before formal schooling begins, like I say, and they're enriched through every single early childhood experience that is steeped in rich vocabulary, lots of engagement, lots of practical activities and social play, all of which have a really, really big part to play in who that child's becoming as a learner, the influence of which could not be more pronounced. Children starting school demonstrating low cognitive skills are 6 times more likely to still be doing so a year later, with those children that are behind when they're 5 years old are much more likely to still be behind their peers by the time they're 7 years old. They'll also tend to struggle with social and emotional development, which affects their academic achievements, as well as their health, their well-being, happiness, and resilience. Without quality foundations, they may be struggling in ways that see additional needs being overlooked or misdiagnosed, and this further intensifies their feelings of isolation or disadvantage. Schools can't effectively close that gap, and children who arrive at the bottom range of ability will tend to stay there. Whereas the lasting effects of an enriched experience of early childhood are seen in children's independence, their confidence, and social skills from day one. When a child is ready to take full advantage of their school experiences, when they're confident, that when they have good physical and communication skills, speaking, listening, and comprehending, they typically show improved levels of motivation and a lower sense of failure, with school profiles 4 to 6 months ahead of their peers. These effects are not fleeting, but remain throughout their first years as expectations in reading and maths are exceeded, and they show enhanced intellectual development that's further promoted as concepts are accessed and understood more easily. If you imagine that child on day one of their school experience going in and really understanding what's going on, they go into day 2 far more confident, far more ready for anything that's thrown at them. And that's further intensified in week 2 and month 3. And those effects are just growing and growing and growing. The school classroom, as I said, will introduce children to formal decontextualized learning, that is, trying to teach them things out of context. For example, giving them a worksheet that asks them to write down the steps of making a sandwich, no bread in sight, or the life cycle of a butterfly while they're sat at that desk, perhaps with picture aids. But if you think about how we've evolved, Our brains aren't designed for demonstrating displays of our knowledge, but for learning how to get things done quickly in situations that matter, something that worksheets and tests simply don't offer. But in the early years, we have this amazing opportunity to embrace these styles of learning that children have evolved to thrive in and enjoy. So let them demonstrate the true extent of what they can do before these limiting factors are put in place, and avoid that sense of failure that is put in place when we take away their natural instincts all too soon. Children also need to feel positive about the efforts that they're making. When they're given rich experiences where they can see the results of their efforts, they can see how their ideas and opinions will work, and they can see the value of different attempts as they work towards a goal, all of which is extending their belief in their own abilities and establishing their own identity of themselves as a good learner. So if you've ever seen a child trying desperately to build a tower that's taller than their friends or taller than the one that they were able to build yesterday, the enthusiasm and drive for achieving that, you can't get that in any other way than those practical experiences. And as all of that really rich learning is happening, offer them meaningful, measured and focused encouragement, all rooted from the effort that they're putting in, because effort is something that they can control. If instead you praise them for being good, or because they're clever, or because they've got real talent, these are things that they're not in control of, and this can undervalue their persistence. Children who are regularly receiving that kind of praise are seen to give up much more quickly when they're presented with a challenge. They then see that challenge as some kind of proof that the limit of their talents have been reached, or they don't want to tempt failing, as that's going to challenge their identity of being clever or good that they've been given. Children who've been praised for their efforts, however, will tend to see a challenge as needing to put more effort in, something that in that effort that is something that they've been has been associated with receiving a great response, and they're really keen to give more of it. Children's personalities and social behaviour traits are also developing during this time. They are sensitive to the people around them, the inspiration that they're being given and that's being offered, and the support that they're receiving. They're developing their confidence as well as their higher intellectual, behavioural and social skills. And it's all of this over any academic concerns that should be the focus during these early years. Negative experiences of learning are likely to affect their future underachievement, both directly and through the effect it has on their attention skills, their concentration and their persistence. Being engaged on an emotional level is also deeply important, and this requires environments that are free from excessive stress, such as a pressure to conform, to behave in ways that they're not yet ready for, and also that are free from any sense of failure if they don't know something. So if you take that in mind and then imagine a group of children sat around a table doing a group activity, or sat in a circle waiting as you go all around that circle waiting for their response, those very young children are being expected to conform in a physically constricting way, to wait their turn for sometimes long periods of time. And this is not what they're developmentally ready for. At 3, 4 years old, they need to be physically learning. They need to be embracing their environment, running, achieving, and finding the things that they need when they need them. Children are also becoming more aware of their gender differences at this time too. Girls tend to be ahead in most areas. They're more likely to want to cooperate and conform to what's been asked of them. They tend to be more sociable with their friends and have greater confidence in being able to do something. And perhaps because of those well-developed traits, they tend to grasp those kind of pre-reading and early number concepts more easily. all of which suggests that the gender differences that we find in children's early achievements in school have already begun. So be particularly mindful when supporting and sustaining their development in these areas, as both boys and girls are going to be struggling in their own ways. But does all of that really make a difference in the longer term? Well, studies have suggested that the male dominance that we see in industries that require maths, physics, and technology subjects is actually rooted in the construction toys that boys tend to be offered in their early childhood when those areas of the brain were being strengthened. Whereas little girls tend to be offered dolls and the home-based play from a really young age and are seen to dominate within the care industries. You only need to take a walk down the boys or girls aisles of any toy shop to see that duality in action. You may think that you're offering stimulating, engaging environments to challenge children's thinking, regardless of whether it's a little boy or a little girl. But observe where your children go and the resources that they naturally engage in when you give them freedom to choose their play. And ask yourself how much external influence is already impacting their choices. Is an underlying gender bias already affecting this? And if these choices promote certain styles of thinking or ways of playing that some children never engage with, ask yourself, what is it that they're missing? There's been some really interesting studies done where even early years practitioners are popped in a room with all different kinds of toys and resources available to them. They're given a child who they know nothing about other than literally the clothes that they're wearing. And automatically the child in the little pink baby grow is given the dolls to play with and asked afterwards, did they enjoy playing with the dolls and the home resources? Or did you ever think of giving them the cars and the trikes to play with? To which they respond, no, they wanted the dolls. That's what they were after playing with. And of course, after the research is completed, are told actually it was a little boy. It was just dressed in a pink baby grow. But straight away, our bias in these fields are already showing themselves. So see if there are any areas that, when you watch children play, see if there are any areas that are receiving limited attention, and talk with your children about an activity to address these things. What resources and planning might you need? Be inspired by their interests and enthusiasms as you let them guide you. As adults, we also tend to respond to our little girls and boys very differently with the language we use and the permissions that we grant. While the child that we lovingly refer to as champ or sport will be encouraged to climb a little higher or run a little faster, petal or sweetheart tends to be encouraged to sit and play nicely. And there is so much research to back this up. And when you become aware of these things, you really start noticing it inside that school classroom or early years environment. It's really easy to fall into these practices if we're not mindful of them. And it's only when we give these kinds of things our active attention that we can be sure to give children all the experiences they need to develop their brains and bodies in all the ways that they require. This all seems like an awful lot to think about, but if we begin to understand the impact that these small changes can have on our children, you begin to see the importance of them. To simultaneously cater to all of these needs requires well-planned resources and environments inside and out, preferably with free and instant movement between the indoors and outdoors if you can, as we recognise and facilitate children's independent thoughts. When children are given opportunity to spontaneously explore what and where they're drawn to, their imagination and creativity is promoted. They try out various roles, initiating and manipulating experiences as they investigate and make decisions, persisting in ways needed to make sense of their world. So think about the opportunities your children have access to and how free they are to enjoy the experiences they need in that moment. Can they explore new ideas and discoveries in different ways? Can they combine different resources and concepts? If you're not sure, just observe them with those questions in mind. When they were babies, it was clear that they were learning everything through their senses. But this is a learning mechanism that we retain throughout our lives. As children become increasingly independent and self-sufficient, avoid overlooking such fundamental methods of enriching the learning experiences. Perform a sensory audit on their environment. Look out for how each of their senses is being stimulated at any moment. And, identify the experiences that inform their senses. You might want to observe a child every 5 minutes and tick off which senses they're using in that moment. Could you exchange those plastic fruits and vegetables for real ones? Or could you remove the paints for a day and give them fruit purees and yogurt to play with? What sounds do they hear? Is it a constant background noise? Or are you using different tempo music to encourage different behaviours or to signify different moods? Do they have opportunities to hear subtle differences between the birds in the trees or between a car or lorry passing by? All of these are essential skills that children need when learning to read, as they listen for the subtle difference in the sounds of the letters that they're trying to learn. And unless they've had those experiences of really fine-tuning their hearing during the early years, they're really going to struggle between hearing the difference between a b and a d, which might sound very different in a word, but look so similar on the page. Suitably selected resources should also be offered with the time, the space and freedom to engage in the rich learning opportunities that they offer. Resources then should be fresh, interesting and stimulating to capture a child's attention, to generate ideas and challenge their thinking. They should be plentiful so that they can be explored in all kinds of different ways. They should be open-ended rather than manufactured for an immediate purpose where a predetermined goal is going to limit their investigations and deeper learning opportunities. They should be thought-provoking so that you can talk about them together, questioning their purpose and investigating what they could do in ways that you're not automatically the expert. Allow children's ideas to germinate, free from excessive distractions, interruption or management, and be ready to see what they have to show you, even if that might be quite different to what you may have expected. So think for a moment and consider, what resources do you use that offer those things? Or what could you use? Think about where you get your resources from. Are they all toys manufactured by toy manufacturers with a certain purpose in mind? Or do you go rummaging in charity shops or ask other adults for authentic dressing up clothes and kitchen utensils that puzzle everyone? I have a brother who's a chef and used to love getting, the big white chef's hats for the children to play around in. Real authentic things that makes them feel like a real chef in that kitchen, and utensils that aren't immediately obvious. So even the adults are sort of like, what on earth does this thing do? As you offer any activity, avoid being focused on getting the activity that you had in your mind done or achieving its outcome. Think instead of the rich journey and the learning that's going on with that child. To explain what I mean here, think about an elaborate piece of artwork that you enjoy, or a favourite piece of music, or a book that you love just becoming lost in. When you do those things, you're not worried about getting through as many as possible or ticking them off of some kind of tick list. You enjoy the deep fulfillment that you're taking in those moments. And to a child, deep engagement is an activity that offers this. A rhyming picture book may have limited appeal to you on its 36th read through, but for a child, its rhythm, its pictures, words, colours and story all offer so much as they notice new things with every time they go back and revisit it. Or like as they're struggling to build that tower just a little bit higher than it was yesterday. So give in to that desire and let them decide what activities, resources and books they need in that moment. What's going to do it for them right here, right now? I mean, do you remember being at school and being told what you had to read next? It can suck all the life out of that experience for you. So also, as I mentioned earlier, it is so important for children to start school with a really good, secure level of communication. Unsurprisingly, research shows us quite clearly that there is a strong link between a child's level of communication and the relationships that they have with the people around them. If a child is unable to engage, this is going to present social difficulties for them. So their grasp of language is of such great importance. If you imagine the experiences being faced by a child with limited language within the realities of the school classroom, compared to that head start that a confident speaker is going to experience, the resulting outcomes and class dynamics are clear. They're going to have problems in getting themselves understood, which may see them become overly introverted or extroverted as they try and be noticed. Feelings of frustration or potential isolation can then develop. Without support, that may then see them less likely to join in or to become involved. Instead, they may be disruptive or disobedient, all of which might become confused with lower ability, which could be a very long way from the truth. There may also be confusion over an unhelpful diagnosis that they're being given, when actually what's happening is they just don't have those communication skills to be able to engage. So how can we go about offering really valuable learning experiences to children now that they are a little bit older and getting ready for that school transition? Well, to do that, I'm going to share with you some advice that I offer in one of my books, Developing School Readiness and Creating Lifelong Learners. So let's take a look at some practical things that you can put in place as you continue to support children's lifelong learning on that lead up to school. So in my book then, I talk about 16 features of lifelong learning that you can start developing in children from the moment they're born. And if you're interested, I do have chapters in the book on how you can do that with babies, with toddlers and with older children, as well as how you can take all these practices into the school classroom. But to help you to support this development in young children today, I've grouped these 16 features into 7 behaviours. And within the freedoms of the early years, before children are expected to sit at school desks, I'd encourage you to take every opportunity to explore these through the experiences that you offer. The behaviours then are doing things for myself, doing new things, being brave, having good ideas, having a go, having fun, and thinking. And as I look at these over the next few slides, consider your children's growing abilities and how you can maximise their opportunities through investigations and experiences. Can you identify any areas that are receiving limited attention? What could you do to address this? And what might your children say? You might want to think about the time and opportunities you give to children to self-direct and allow them to explore their own directions of inquiry, revisiting ideas as often as they need to, and trusting in their judgment as they develop and celebrate their effort. And think about the interesting resources that you offer and the permissions you give them to explore more tricky concepts, such as fantasy or risky play, reacting to their interests as they evolve, and make the most of any unexpected events. And if at all possible, consider how much you take their play outside, offering them the increased stimulation and freedoms that only being outdoors can give you. To make connections in their learning then, children need to be able to do things for themselves and to try new things. And to do this, they need opportunities to touch and manipulate objects. They need to experiment with ideas as they explore new concepts, freely introducing and combining experiences as they process and they practice and explore. If you can provide your children with creative environments and tangible experiences, their intrinsic motivation, their curiosity and independence will bloom. You can support this by linking authentic toys to experiences within the home. Use realistic items to embrace their culture, to explore their own identity and the people and experience realities around them. Allow children to own their environment, freely accessing and manipulating the resources and experiences that they need. This way, activities can be interesting and satisfying, related to what they know and they think they know and what they want to know next. Offer children opportunities to be brave by letting them test their courage and confidence by offering achievable challenges. Invite them to have good ideas, using their imagination and intuition by solving problems and making decisions as they demonstrate and celebrate their individual ideas, unafraid of making mistakes and keen to try again. You can support this process with initial links to what's familiar. Bring in favourite songs, rhymes and books and bring them to life with genuine objects, and then present a new object that you can structure a whole story around. Talk with them as you consider a dilemma together, helping to fill in gaps or misunderstandings they might have, as you see lack of knowledge, yours as well as theirs, as areas that still need to be explored rather than being recognised as a failure. Allow children to have a go for themselves and experience the fun of learning and finding out. Through opportunities to get stuck into the learning process, allow them to do things like measure the flour in a cooking activity for themselves, rather than watching you do it and waiting for that token stir. Offer them access to adaptable, multisensory, authentic items to promote and extend their investigations, providing the right tools for the job. Let them see something real come out of something that they've been talking about, as you enhance their connections and add personal relevance to their reflections of things. Encourage social interactions and discussions and collaboration with you and with other children and with other adults as you support and enrich their social, their emotional and cognitive achievements. Within safe environments, allow them to play out their disputes rather than using distraction or simply telling them to stop, as they learn how to rationalize and talk through their conflicts, trialing techniques and solving their own problems. And lastly, children are active and independent thinkers who learn best when they're allowed to make connections in their learning. And they do that best when they're allowed to combine many different processes and experiences and really see their learning flourish. So allow children to access and repeat the experiences they need when they need them and how they need them. Offer a wide range of practical and authentic experiences within different social groupings, promoting language as opportunities are offered to discuss, to trial and approach new ideas, where logical steps and lateral thinking can be explored. Supply requested information rather than all the answers, and allow them to find their voice and reflect on their past experiences and achievements. Understand and respect that your children are going to view the world in unique and highly personal ways. And once you recognize this, you can develop the diverse thinking and reflection that they're going to require for symbolic and abstract thought, promoting meaningful levels of understanding that go beyond surface knowledge, because these children are growing up ready to face a world that we have no idea what it's going to look like. And they are not going to manage if all we have given them are the skills to see things the way that we see them. They need to be able to see the world in new and unique ways if they are ever going to solve the problems of the future and cope in a world that, like I say, we have no understanding of what it's going to look like. And these last couple of years have taught us nothing. It's taught us that. I really hope that you've enjoyed this whistle-stop tour through what early learning in those years in preparation for school learning really can look like. And my other talks over previous weeks. I hope I've given you lots and lots to think about as you nurture children throughout their early childhood. And please do check out the full range of parenting courses, CPD and setting accreditation that I can offer you at nurturingchildhoods.co.uk. But for now, as I look to unshare my screen with you, I just want to thank you once again for joining me today, and then to invite you to ask me any questions that you might have or offer comments and connections and throw the floor open to discussion. Okay, I don't know if anybody...
Thanks, Dr. Kathryn. Really, that was a very informative session.
Thank you.
And now let me thank Dr. Kathryn for joining us today. That was very informative and attractive session about learning in early childhood, especially in preschool. And I wanted to thank Dr. Muhammad Khalifa, the director of ECF, for his invitation to me to moderate this session today. Also, I wanted to thank Dr. Kathryn again about her session. Really, Doctor, your session today is very important in the 21st century. We taught about you many important points about opportunities for practical activities, the play, social play, how to promote positive feelings. And also you recommended that we must support development of personality, confidence and behaviors for our children, especially in early childhood and indeed in preschool. Also, in general, you have talked about supporting lifelong learning, especially in the years before schools. But the most important point in my thoughts was about the features of the lifelong learning. All of these skills become very indeed and most requested in the 21st century among our many information and technology and the advanced in all the fields in education and learning. Really, we need to prepare our children to both the individual and society for the future in way that rebels change itself, the integration of the individual into the rapidly changing the information society and finding a worthly place within that society, acquiring new information and enriching capacities is made possible through lifelong learning and become more qualified. The individual who learns for life has a continuous ambition and also to learn and responsibility for his own learning. The lifelong learner also the lifelong learner renews his life perspective, behavior, and values. This person that we call my children or your children must also learn to learn. In other words, the individual must be equipped with the basic information skills in order to better understand and process the information, and must be able to make learning process more productively for him or her. Doctor, also without these skills, the possibility of learning is reduced, or one can learn less with more effort. So we have learned from you today many informative information, and we thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, if anyone want to ask Dr. Kathryn in learning field or education field, how to nurture our children. Yes, many thanks, Dr. Kathryn. Your session was very clear today, and we hope to join us in many sessions in the future. Many thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much. It was a pleasure.
Many thanks. Many thanks to all the participants in ACF, and we are waiting for you for the next session with Mrs. Sima. Inshallah, we will inform you with our post about ACF page at Facebook and all the social media. And hope you have a day. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye, Dr. Kathryn.
Bye-bye.